SMU, why waste time? The most important thing is that Clemson, first team out, but the biggest story tonight was Alabama being the second team out. A lot of people, including Heather Dinich, had predicted they would be on the cut line. That face you see there is Mike Griffith, for those of you watching on TV, and we say hello to Griff. Happy Thanksgiving, Griff. Best to your family. Good to have you back.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you and everyone at the SEC Network in the audience, Paul. It's a wonderful week.
Well, let's get your reaction first to the obvious, the CFP, then we'll get to some more important issues.
Well, we predicted that Indiana wouldn't fall out. I mean, they kind of protected them with that high ranking early, even though they hadn't beaten anybody or played anybody of consequence. That high ranking protected them in the event they got blown out, which they did, blown out and still in the college football playoff, because the Big Ten carries more weight because they continue to value the one-loss record more than they do the strength of schedule. I suppose I was surprised, like others, that Clemson jumped over Alabama and Ole Miss, another team that I don't think has really scored an impressive victory. And yet it does protect, I believe, Georgia in the event Georgia loses the SEC championship game, because it provides somewhat of a buffer now between Georgia and Alabama and Ole Miss, two teams, two three-loss teams that beat Georgia head-to-head. But wait a minute, now Clemson's ahead of them, and Georgia beat Clemson 34-3. So I think this neatly cleans that up a little bit for the committee. Should Georgia lose to Texas in the SEC championship game in anything less than a blowout fashion? Now, if A&M makes it as a number 20 team and were to beat Georgia, I wonder if that may change the equation a little bit. A&M being a lower-ranked team, and of course, would automatically get that seed. I'm not sure how that would affect the dynamics. Would Clemson still be the team to go, or now would the tiebreak maybe be between Clemson and re-examining Alabama or Ole Miss, depending on how they do in their respective in-state rivalries this weekend?
Assuming everyone holds court, where are you on that Alabama-Ole Miss conundrum versus Clemson?
I kind of like Ole Miss a little bit better in terms of the resume. I don't think the loss to Florida on the road is quite as damning as the manner in which Alabama lost against Oklahoma. I mean, that was not as competitive of a game as I would have expected. And I suppose I gave Alabama a mulligan for their loss at Vanderbilt, and against Tennessee, they didn't quite seem as impressive. I mean, here's the thing, Paul. I thought Alabama at its best was capable of winning the national championship. When Alabama played at its peak, at its best in LSU form and first half, the problem with that team is consistency. And when we talk about champions, consistency is an element of that. And Alabama simply wasn't consistent enough, in my opinion, to get the nod over an Ole Miss team that I thought, had they played head-to-head on a neutral field, probably would have beaten Alabama 6 out of 10 times, and unless Alabama showed up and played their best, and then they beat them by 3 touchdowns. But we didn't get to see that Alabama team very often. When they rose, they were fantastic, but over the course of the season, just simply not consistent enough. I do have some interest in South Carolina. If they beat Clemson impressively, perhaps I reach back and I say, you know what? Let's move South Carolina past Ole Miss. Let's move South Carolina past Clemson, and let's put them in the on-deck circle in the event that one of the favorites ahead stumble.
Talking to Mike Griffith. Mike, I was on a program earlier, and Stephen A. Smith asked me with a straight face, do I think the SEC is still the best conference in the country? You know what I said, but I'm curious the fact that the question's even being asked. And my answer was pretty obvious, 1 to 16, no question. But where do you think the SEC is right now, just at least from a perception standpoint?
I want to know what planet Stephen A. Smith's been on. I mean, what are you missing here, man? I mean, is he talking to the College Football Playoff Committee members or anybody else on the planet? Because everybody else on the planet will tell you that with 8 teams in the top 25, even the CFP's top 25 at that the SEC is clearly the deepest and most talented conference. And I'm not going to bore anybody with the metrics. We went over that last week, and every NFL draft we talked, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a nice plug for Stephen A. Smith, but he clearly isn't relevant in college football, or he wouldn't be asking a dumb question like that. I don't understand where that comes from. I don't know what metric or what game he's pointing to. I saw Oregon again struggle against a Wisconsin team that Alabama blew out. What I saw was very effective scheduling by the Big Ten in terms. I don't remember Penn State playing Oregon. this year. I thought that was a pretty convenient thing. Now, in the same breath, I'll tell you that I thought Texas got a pretty sweetheart deal coming into the SEC when I look at who they played and who they didn't play. And the one team they did play beat them handily in Austin, Texas, and that was the Georgia Bulldogs. But again, I digress. I mean, I think some of this is a lesson learned. If this committee stays in place, I can't imagine that it would. I got to think this is something that's going to be looked at closely. I think we're going to have to consider, unfortunately, and I don't think Ward Manuel did this on purpose, but bias is inherent in people. We all have some perspective and some personal experiences that affect our judgment, if even subconsciously. I mean, there's a possibility this guy might actually believe what he's saying when he does these teleconferences. And that's why I think we're going to have to look at sitting athletic directors and whether or not they should continue to be on this committee, because I've seen a lot of self-serving decisions made over the years. To me, this has been the most flagrant.
But yeah, Texas didn't play anybody, but Texas did beat Florida handily, beat Kentucky handily, beat OU handily. And I think because of those three schools, Ole Miss and Alabama are in a lot of trouble right now. Let me get to the Dawgs for a second, because I think most people believe they win Friday, I should say. They're going to be okay. But what about that game Friday night? And I know all the cliches and I know all the books have been written about that rivalry, but you're on the ground there.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game. The students aren't on campus. It's going to be a home game. It's going to be under the lights, but it's not going to be quite the same. It's certainly not the same as it was for Tennessee. And Georgia Tech and Brent Kim, this guy's a dude, Paul. When he played at Georgia Tech, he was a team captain, a lineman. He beat Georgia. He coached under Saban. He coached under O'Leary. They got this guy, Buster Faulkner. Don't be surprised if Georgia doesn't hire him sometime in the future. This guy is a really good offensive coordinator. They played Georgia close last year, a better Georgia team, a not as good Georgia Tech team. I expect Tech to come out fighting, and this is their Super Bowl. This is their program-changing win. And, human nature being what it is, I mean, the Dogs know regardless of what happens Friday night, they can get into the playoff with a win in the SEC championship. All that said, Kirby's doing what he can to fire him up. It's a game Georgia should win easily, but I don't think it'll be easy. I think it's going to be physical. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some attrition. I continue to ask myself why Georgia plays a home and home against a team of this stature. LSU dropped Tulane a long time ago. Wise decision. Look, when Georgia Tech checked out of the SEC and didn't want that smoke, Georgia should have left them behind, but they continue to empower their rival by giving them a home and home that will be moved to Mercedes-Benz Stadium for more money for Georgia Tech to pay more players in the state of Georgia and take from Georgia. So you tell me why they play it. I think Georgia survives it, Paul, but I don't think it's going to be easy.
If you had to look at, you mentioned that game, there are a couple of other games, obviously, this weekend, the Iron Bowl, the Tennessee Vanderbilt game, and obviously the one out in Texas. The one out in Texas is a little different, but do you see a possible upset either in Tuscaloosa or in Nashville?
Not in Tuscaloosa. And Nashville is tough. I mean, I think Tennessee is a tough, gritty team. I mean, this isn't your typical high-scoring, explosive Josh Heupel offense. This is a blue-collar football team. I do think that they're playing for a playoff spot. I do think they'll win that game. But Vanderbilt's been tough at that stadium. I don't know if we've ever said that before, but they beat Alabama there. They played Texas within 3. This is an exciting quarterback, a playmaking quarterback. I think Clark Lee is probably my pick for SEC Coach of the Year with what he's done with that program. I think Tennessee survives it, but another one of these close games, I think the most likely upset is in College Station, Texas. And those teams haven't played for a long time. And, with all due respect to Texas, and, I bow and give respect to Texas because that's what apparently we're supposed to do. Steve Sarkisian and all that. I was there. And if you don't, they'll throw things on the field and stall. So let's all make sure we don't hold up the program by insulting Texas here. But A&M is backs to the wall. Running quarterback. I think they've got that shot, that puncher's chance at taking down Texas and really gumming things up. They haven't played them in a long time. They wanted this game. Tuscaloosa, I think this is a game Jalen Milroe decides to show up and play well in. And I think Alabama has something to play for. I think Auburn's given them a little fuel. There's been a little bulletin board talk. Never a smart idea. Alabama at home should roll over Auburn. A&M, though, that game I think is going to come down to the final minute.
Okay, Mike Griffith, we will see you next week when we are in Atlanta. We'll take a short break here. We have a lot to do today. A number of other guests will be dropping by, and, of course, your phone calls straight ahead.